Germany decided to close its borders for a period of 6 months. And I want to say that this is a bit confusing, because is there a pattern or are there just isolated incidents? That's the main issue that people are concerned about, because after the attacks in Solingen, we had the whole establishment saying this was a person who had mental illness and this was just an isolated incident, and everyone was scaremongering about the far right.
Well, a lot of these isolated incidents.
Yeah, there's a pattern of isolated incidents, as I say. But the German government now acted in a way that you wouldn't expect. They act almost as they would act if they admitted that there is a pattern. And this is something that happened a few weeks ago. Germany deported 28 Afghans to Taliban-led Kabul. They also gave them around €1,000, I don't know, as a parting gift or something.
Well, that's to buy the plane ticket to come back again.
Maybe. I hope not. But anyway, it's at least it's suboptimal, but at least they're out. At least they have been deported.
I mean, what sort of plane was it? I mean, was it like a 1950s biplane or something? I mean, you could probably get like 300 people on that.
Yeah, no idea. But I think that the government now is confusing us because they are acting as if there is a pattern. We have here this article by RTE saying Germany tightens control at all borders in immigration crackdown. And they're saying that the government has announced plans to impose tighter controls at all of the country's land borders in what it called an attempt to tackle irregular, which means illegal, and protect the public from threats such as Islamic extremism. Now, that's the language of people who go after patterns, not just after isolated incidents.
Well, my question is, I guess you might be getting onto it. If you are, just shut me down. But so they're closing their borders sort of entirely, or like to what extent? I mean,
they say that they are closing them for a period of 6 months. They're going to do a trial period. And it's when it comes to, as they say, irregular, but I think they are talking about illegal migration. Now, obviously, we will see how this plays out, because we have heard many times governments who are saying that they're going to do something about illegal migration, but end up not doing so. But it's something that we have to report.
The thing I'm thinking is maybe it's a bit silly, but as an island, we're in a unique situation. But with something like Germany, if you imagine the very, very long border with Poland, let's say, not that's probably necessarily their biggest threat, but unless you build a really long wall there, a Trump-style Mexico wall, or Hungary actually have built quite a lot of fences and things. Yes. I don't think Germany's going to do that. So,
well, you could look at Poland's other borders.
How are they actually going to stop it, though? I mean,
where they actually, well, Poland has long borders with a number of other countries, and they're able to defend them.
Yeah,
they just have barbed wire and blokes with batons.
So my question is then: is Germany going to do that? Put up at least sort of chicken wire?
Well, we will see, but possibly they could collaborate with other countries, as Dan mentioned. There are also some heavy border controls in Poland. Maybe there's going to be a coalition of more, traditional, more right-wing approaches to it. Poland now has Tusk, which isn't what most people want, but we'll see. So they say the controls will start on the 16th of September and initially last for 6 months, the Interior Ministry said in a statement. They are part of a series of measures Germany has taken to toughen its stance on irregular migration in recent years following a surge in arrivals, in particular people fleeing war and poverty in the Middle East. And they're mentioning that Chancellor Olaf Scholz is running a basically left-wing government. Interesting here, we have this by David Atherton, who is saying that the Interior Minister of Germany, Nancy Faeser, has announced this border control on security grounds. Now, what is interesting is that she is behind the attempt to cancel Compact magazine, and she was one of the major voices behind those who were saying that the Solingen stabbing attack at the Diversity Festival was just an isolated incident that was going to be co-opted by the far right. So it's really suspicious and confusing when you have politicians who act consistently in such a manner when they're announcing border controls. That's why I said in the beginning that it is a bit confusing.
But it sounds to me like they just want to say, please stop voting AFD.
Yeah, I feel like the next sentence David Atherton said there is maybe hits the nail on the head. Like the Tories pretending they're going to stop the small boats.
Yeah.
Rishi pretending. It's just to try and undercut reform. Maybe it's that what she really thinks is that they don't really care about Islamic extremism. They are all in for a replacement and they hate the German people. But they need to win elections. And so to screw over AfD at the ballot box, they're going to make noises like this.
We will see, but what is interesting here is that the AfD won some really good results in some state elections, and as you see here, this definitely is something that the government paid close attention to. Now, it's interesting that we are not talking about a center-right pretending government. We're talking about a left-wing coalition led by Olaf Scholz. So it's interesting that they would adopt a rhetoric of this kind. So we had recently, we also spoke about this, but it's good to remember this and bear the whole situation in mind. We had state elections in Germany, or Germany had state elections, in Thuringia and Saxony. And the AfD performed very well. We see here in Saxony, they won around 31.5% of the vote, whereas the CDU, I think it's the Christian Democratic Union, won 32. And here these are the prognoses, but the numbers were sort of there. And in Thuringia, the AfD also won some really large results. So I must apologize because I had a lot of links and I had the actual results, and I ended up putting the prognosis in. Sorry, that's a mistake on my part. We also see here that the German Zoomers were overwhelmingly pro-AfD.
Yes.
We see here, for instance, in Thuringia, close to 40%, it's 39% of the people aged 18 to 24, they voted for AfD. So it's roughly 4 out of 10 young people voted for AfD.
That's great. It makes me think of the quote in 1984 where he says, if there's hope, it's in the proles. Yeah. I feel like if there's hope, it's in the Zoomers.
Yes.
Germany
Come on, Team Zoomer, let's do this.
Germany does currently have the best Zoomers.
German Zoomers, best Zoomers.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we are also seeing here that the AfD is scoring some really good results this year. So, for instance, in the EU election, they were the second largest party, and they are a force to be reckoned with. They're not a force to be ignored. And the very fact that people right now, especially young people, who are traditionally, you could say, the voting bloc that the left tries to appeal to, when 4 out of 10 of young people voted for AfD, that's a huge ringing bell that's a huge alarming bell for.
For years, the left have taken the attitude that we've got the young people, and therefore, that means we're right and we're going to win the future and stuff.
Yes.
I don't think that is written in stone. The idea that if you're black, you've got to vote Democrat.
Of course not.
Not necessarily. Yeah. If you're young, you're definitely going to be left wing. Not necessarily. Depends what world you're brought up in, doesn't it?
Exactly. And these generalizations are frequently just propaganda when the left is saying that, we care for the workers, or we care for young people. We care for the young people who don't have any kind of prospects, and the bad, rich capitalists, all these is propaganda. It's more a game of numbers. It's more an issue of degrees. To what extent do young people support this or that? And the same question applies for.
Is that their main parliament, this one?
No, this is for the European elections in this summer, and the results. And I wanted here to show you the kind of progress the AfD is marking the last 10 years. Now, obviously, this is just one poll from another, and this is from Politico. I've seen also different polls giving different numbers, but more or less they are showing a kind of tripling of support for the AfD in the last 10 years. So, for instance, here in about 2014, this poll here says that the popular support was around 5%, and they're saying here right now it's close to 17, 18. So that's more than triple. We saw some other polls saying that it was about 10 and it's more close to 30. And this is much closer to the results we saw in Saxony and Thuringia.
Oh, and like you just showed us, about 40% amongst the Zoomers.
Exactly. And also we need to bear in mind that this is something that it happened in the last 10 years. Obviously, the fact that Angela Merkel opened the borders in 2015 isn't inconsequential. So perhaps the coalition of the government of Olaf Scholz understands that they cannot not do anything about it, or at least they cannot be seen to do nothing about it, which raises the question whether this is just a loophole.
And they've toyed with the idea of just banning the AfD, but we're probably thinking that, oh, okay, maybe that's a little bit tricky, so we just tend to be fractionally based or something.
Yeah, but and that's the issue though, that a lot of the times when people are trying to ban things, they're making them even more notorious. And when we should bear in mind that the people who are representing an establishment that is rapidly losing its credibility in the eyes of more and more people, they often forget that when they represent an establishment that sort of loses legitimacy and they attack anyone, they're essentially raising the prestige of their targets. So it doesn't work.
No, of course, yeah, the Streisand effect.
Yeah.
Also, I think you could say that Zoomers, particularly older Zoomers, the older end of the Zoomer thing, they would still be old enough to remember Germany pre-2015, 2016, even if they were kids. Yeah. They still remember when their country wasn't flooded with Syrians, when there wasn't just police being stabbed.
It wasn't that long ago that Merkel did it. I remember
right,
when
it's
it was.
Not that long ago, right?
She was
less than 10 years ago.
Yeah, she was quite sensible on immigration until she went to some TV debate and some woman got up and got all emotional about immigration and she didn't have an answer for it and she just like overnight changed her policy and then it was like, okay, well let's just have 10 million of them then.
I have to introduce the Greek perspective here, because a lot of the time I listen to people who are giving a more intellectualizing perspective on the issue, and they're trying to talk about, somehow Merkel had some humanitarian ideals and she switched overnight or something. I don't think it has anything to do with ideals or something.
What do you think is driving it?
I think it was just a matter of political expediency, the way she saw it at the time. Because at the time, a lot of people don't remember that in 2015 Greece elected a disastrously leftist government that opened the borders. We had a flood of millions of people in 2015.
Okay.
And
right, so you're saying she was looking for the right excuse and she got her optics moment and then...
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So
that's probably fair.
I think it's much more frequently, reasons of this sort, more tactical reasons than just Merkel being an ideologue or something. I mean, obviously she had some ideology. She didn't want to appear as if she was losing Europe and stuff, but it ended up leading to a situation where Germany isn't looking very good.
Yeah, and
but also I have to say this because I want to give the full picture. The Greeks were, before we elected that government, we were constantly saying to the EU and the EU leaders that guarding Europe's borders is an EU issue. You can't just allow countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain with sea borders that are much more difficult to guard in comparison to land borders just deal with it by themselves. And they weren't listening to it.
Yeah, and to be fair, the wave of mass immigration kind of happened all over the Western world at roughly the same time.
Yes.
So, they all got on board with, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Infinity Africans.
And if you remember, there was that Syrian war involving ISIS and everything.
Yes.
So, if anyone remembers. No, a lot of people's memories are really, really short. They
and
forget
also,
the context of stuff.
Yeah, some people don't want to talk about Western influence in that area. But let's leave that for...
Whose influence?
Western influence in that area.
Right.
And yeah, but let's leave that for another time.
Yeah.
So the major question here is, what is driving many Germans to vote for the AFD, and a lot of people throughout Europe and the EU to vote for more right-wing parties. And people are just honest about it. They just constantly say it. It's, to a very large extent, public safety and the feeling that their cultures are being eroded. It's just as simple as that. But rather than having governments who are taking that seriously and saying that we should do something about it, we have a lot of establishments that are trying to penalize people for speaking about it. But it seems that there are limits to the degree you can do this. And the AFD's striking performance in German elections sort of pushes the left-wing government of Olaf Scholz to at least understand that he has to appear as if he's doing something about it. Whether he does it or not, we're going to be here to watch.
I'm pretty sure it's fake.
We'll be here. Yeah, I mean, probably. Because there are possibilities. Yeah, but
I mean, let's say it's a sincere idea, and he deports 28 Africans every year. It's like, well, so what?
Yeah, 28. Well done.
He needs to. I mean, slightly unfortunate residents given the nation, but they need whole rail carts, really. You know,
we'll see. We'll see.
Also, with the Zoomers, say like a 25-year-old is a Zoomer, right? That's right in the wheelhouse of being a Zoomer, isn't it? I think that's right. If you're 25,
I don't
know exactly when the threshold
yeah, there
was,
isn't. Right, yeah, there isn't an exact. Anyway, say you're German and you're 25, right? You remember clearly before your country was flooded, completely flooded by Middle Easterners, and you would also probably remember a time when it wasn't the idea that you could afford a mortgage and things, or that your economic future was bright.
And you had none of these.
And now you don't. So
crazy net zero policies and just destroying the nuclear infrastructure of Germany. It's just.
Apparently, the oldest Zoomer is 27.
Okay, right.
The oldest Zoomer on Earth.
So imagine you were born in Poland or East Germany or Soviet Czechoslovakia or something in the late 50s or the 60s, and you grew up and you got to 25 years old, and it was all you'd ever known was the Soviet regime. It would be more difficult to envision a world where maybe we could get rid of Moscow. We don't have to be a Soviet satellite anymore. But the Zoomers of Germany today, it's not that long ago. Yeah. So I get it. I get it. It's great. It's great to see it.
We have this statistic here by Matt Goodwin saying 77% of Germans want to reverse asylum and refugee policy. And I want to say something. We're not in Germany, but we follow up the news from Germany. And we have been talking about some of them very frequent. And I'll just show some of the segments I've been involved in, and we have done together most of them.
I think we probably would have been closed down if we were in Germany.
Probably. And probably by the interior minister who is announcing that she's closing the borders. Yeah, but it's just, we did just a few incidents. We're talking about the Mannheim incident, where someone just went and attacked, I think, Michael Sturzenberger, who was who was criticizing Islam. We also did this Words Over Crimes, where we discussed one of the most. I think that's the toughest segment I've done, and we all three did it together, when it was a very bad incident of a gang rape, where most of these people, they were just let out. They weren't particularly punished, and we had a lady who spoke about it on social media, and she stayed for 10 days in prison, whereas others who were involved in the crime stayed for less.
It's a lot older, but about a year ago I did a segment on why Germany should be run by an AI.
Okay, I think an AI that would generate images.
Well, because if you think about it,
Trump and cats.
No, because if you think about it, if you take the most extreme example of what AI does, all of them line up with German behaviour. So either it goes insanely woke, like the LA version of AI. Well, that's what they're doing now. It either becomes hyper efficient. Well, that's kind of German as well, or it becomes megalomaniacal and tries to destroy the world. Well. You know, so I mean, either way, if you put an AI in charge of Germany, you just think, oh, that's just fine.
Right. We did also cover the Solingen stabbings at the Diversity Festival.
Also, about a year ago or so, I did an interview with Peter Boehringer. Yeah. If anyone was there, go to lotuseaters.com I mean, if you're watching this, you're probably already there.
Right.
But there's an interview where I spoke to one of the vice chairmen. I thought it was a really good interview. He was an interesting chap.
Yeah. Right. And here we have an article from the European Conservative that is talking about some statistics that I showed also when I covered the Solingen stabbings. But I have to remind people of some statistics which are just explaining what is going on. So in Germany, they are comparing here the year 2022 with the year 2023. So the total number of crimes increased by 12.5% in 2023. Non-Germans were 6 times more likely to engage in knife attacks than German citizens. 6 times more likely. And they're definitely not 6 times the population of Germans in Germany.
No.
That's the per capita situation that...
And I spent a fair bit of time in Germany in the 90s, in the early 90s, and not the early 90s, so the late 90s, and it wasn't quite Japan levels of crime, but it was just such a low crime environment.
Yeah, it's amazing how things can change really fast, just really fast with bad policy.
Giant, 600%.
Yeah.
Imagine you're suddenly 6 times richer than you were now.
Yeah.
Imagine someone 6 times your height.
Well, that would be a lot.
Imagine someone that's a giant leap.
They're saying that the average of crimes per day is around 2,165. In 2023, violent acts were 31,887, and there was a 10% increase compared to 2022. So that means that in 2022 they were around 29,000, and now they're close to 32. Sexual violence has increased by 15%. To
only 15%? That doesn't...
15% in a year. From
in 1 year.
2022
Okay,
to
right.
2023. It's massive.
Okay, 1 year, fine.
Violence in train stations and trains has risen by 11%. Pickpocketing incidents increased by 16% to be around 28,000. So you get a lot of... an idea of
what was throwing me there was over 1 year. If you did it back to 2014 when a lot of this started, that it would be like 500, 600%. It only looks like quite a small percentage because you're doing it from a high base of the previous year.
Yeah. So
still big though to me, going up by 12, 15, 16% in 1 year. That's still pretty massive.
Oh, that really adds up after a few years.
Yeah.
The cumulative effect of changes like that. Yeah.
Rouse. Clear them out.
Yes.
So I'll end with saying that there are some signs that there could be some positive changes in Europe. For instance, now Austria is saying that we're not going to open our borders to anyone who won't be able to reach Germany. Any illegal immigrant who tries to reach Germany but won't be able to during the closed borders. Also, we had Hungary, Viktor Orban, saying that when he was fined with 200 million euros for not accepting the number of illegal immigrants by the EU Migration Pact, saying that we're all going to take all of them back to Brussels. We're going to give them a free bus ride back to Brussels. So it could be the case that the more right-wing parties have power in Europe, the more politicians understand that some sense is required when it comes to policies of illegal migration and mass migration. And you could also say that in some cases it's too late, but I mean I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist. But the question is, in a changing environment where a lot of countries are beginning to say that we need to have a sort of tougher approach towards borders, the countries that will remain relaxed will probably receive a lot of pressure. And here is a question by Isabel Oakeshott. She's saying, hammered by migration, Germany announces border checks at all land borders. Schengen, a fundamental pillar of the EU, is collapsing. Where is the UK in all of this? Waving in more illegal migrants. So if the EU starts guarding its borders, and the UK doesn't, then perhaps the pressures to the UK when it comes to mass migration are going to be worse. And I will say that contrary to some people and the takes of some people, I really don't think that Starmer is more sensible than
I mean the disadvantage
without saying that the previous ones were sensible.
The disadvantage for our elites, of course, is that we're a long way from Africa, so they just have to fly them over the top of Europe. So, I mean, that they will find a way, even if there isn't a direct route through France.
Even to stem the flow a bit for them getting to Calais, though, will be helpful. Otherwise, they've got to get a small dinghy from the Bosphorus
UK
all the way
government
through
will
the
just
Med.
put them on a plane and fly them in.
Yeah.
So this is a bit confusing coming from the German government. Most probably they are alarmed by the AFD's performance, and they're trying to mitigate that in the level of communication. But we will be here and we are going to see what happens.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast to the Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can follow our series Lads Hour on the website. This one talking about Hot Fuzz, it's where we have all of our fun, and if you want to see all the other work we're putting out, you can follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.